You read the title? These are some more Reddit stories that I'm going to be reading while I play Minecraft, just like my last video. So if you haven't watched that, make sure to watch that after this, of course. Yeah, here we go. For our first story, it is titled Creepy Taxi Driver, and it reads like this. I was living in Leeds, UK at the time, quite a few years ago. I was just out of university and working evenings at a pub in the city center. One Friday night, I finished around 1 a.m. and couldn't be bothered with the night bus, so I called for a taxi. It wasn't a firm I'd used before, just a number someone at work had scribbled on the staff wall room. Cheap cabs. Stupid, I know. So a silver saloon pulled up 10 minutes later. No company branding, but the guy rolled down the window and said my name, so I figured it was fine. He just looked to be in his 50s, pale, with greasy gray hair that could do with the trim. He didn't really say much as I got in, just nodded and pulled away. The car smelled like old takeaway and air freshener trying to cover it. We made small talk at first. Where have you been tonight? And busy at work? That sort of thing. Anyone that uses taxis know the score. But halfway through the ride, things kind of shifted. He asked if I lived alone. I lied and said I lived with my boyfriend. He laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant laugh, and said, I bet he's not up waiting for you at this hour, is he? I didn't answer. I didn't really know what to say at that point. Then he started talking about how dangerous the streets are for women late at night. How easy it is to just go missing. I made a joke and to try and lighten it. Well, that's comforting coming from my taxi driver. But this time he didn't laugh. Instead he said, yeah, you never really know who you're getting in a car with, do you? And then he looked at me in the rearview mirror for way too long. At this point, I was starting to feel more than a little uneasy. I opened the Maps app on my phone to see where we were. He'd taken a wrong turn. I told him that I thought he was going the wrong way. And then he shrugged, quote unquote, just avoiding traffic. But there was no traffic. It was almost 1:30 in the morning. So I texted a mate, call me now. And luckily she was still awake and did it. No questions asked. Loudly, I said, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Can you meet me outside? Just to let him know someone was expecting me. He didn't say anything, but a minute later, he swung the car back towards the correct road. When we pulled up outside my block of flats, I got out as fast as I could and walked straight to the front door, and pretended to be on my phone saying, I'm on my way up. Only after I heard him drive off did I go around the corner to the actual entrance. I got rid of the phone number on the staff room wall and reported it to the council, but nothing ever came to it. Wish I'd had the foresight to remember the reg or grab a photo, but hey ho, I was tired and frightened. I never used a random taxi again after that. Now it's licensed firms or Ubers where I can see the plate, the name, and the reviews. Won't even flag down a black cab. So, creepy leads, taxi driver who gave me the heebie-jeebies that night, let's not meet again, ever. I feel bad for that person, the original poster, because, like, the worst thing that could have possibly happened actually happened to her. And, well, I guess not the worst thing that could have happened. Like, I guess she could have gotten robbed or kidnapped, I guess. But it was, like, one step away from that level. So, technically, but, yeah, that's a good story. Our next story is titled, I was seeing a fake psychologist for years. Alright, and it reads like this. For some context, I had a really bad childhood. It was terrible, where I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened to those years was from a mixture of sparse memories, things my family have told me about myself, and police reports. One of those things that I do remember, however, is this lady that I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I said down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought that she was someone I could trust. So I did. 7 years later, 14 years old, I admitted to her that I tried to do bad things to myself numerous times. It was a mixture of multiple different factors. My mother's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and more importantly, I never moved on from the horrors in my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly wanted to. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother, or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time on why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic. Maybe being able to explain why my mother was terrible was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started asking very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her suddenly pinpointing all these things must be from the fact that, at this point, she's known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I've gone to in these sessions without even bothering to hide behind the questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all this, something that still affects me to this day, at the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite my own mother into the room and tell her every single thing that I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother explaining the increasing abuse that she had begun to put me through, said straight to her face as she sat next to me. Damn. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. So I tried to do really bad things to myself on my 17th birthday. I ran into my mother's room looking for something that I could OD with, or just something that could push me to the edge. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I'd barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she had even had one of these. In my crazed state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a lot of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what the hell those papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were the transcripts of Auntie and I's sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I had. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the earlier papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that that night I would kill myself after what I figured out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what the hell was going on before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention into our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mother more and more questions about her, Auntie, and she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact. She was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mother's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really a life or death decision. My mother was in the shower, and I had already packed all my stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mother's phone and bolted out of the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mother's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar name. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. So I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place. But even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they called extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where it's due. But it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit on the side of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mother's social media, and when I tried searching up Annie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave my body then. And sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up. Almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, some weird fake one. But when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of herself and my mother years ago. They have literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that now I knew what the hell was going on. Why my mother had transcripts. Why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said. Why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beat black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness, quote unquote. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night was, who is Auntie really? And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with the old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now, though. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way, clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar. And when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account, this psycho had been following me for God knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that didn't make sense finally made sense. The sudden, precise questions. Why my mother suddenly decided to isolate me from my friends. It didn't even say psychologist or anything of that sort in her fucking bio. Tell me why I said chemistry teacher with over 20 years. Fuck my life. I admit that I cried like a baby that night because it had taken years for me to finally understand who the two main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood, instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university. It sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wish I knew sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. Good. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I'm sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do. I decided to post about my experience just in the slight chance anyone had a similar experience with therapy becoming fucked up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise y'all, it gets better with a little luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyway, Auntie, let's not meet again. That was a monster of a read. I really just hope that this person gets better in time, because that is a beyond traumatic, dude. Oh my gosh, I just figured out how to fix my audio, like mid recording. Okay, well, I'm gonna leave this in because there used to be like a static noise in the background and I just hated it. But I just figured out how to change it. I had to like switch a switch on my microphone, and that's all it took. So I'm gonna keep that in because holy shit. All right, that's funny. All right, well, our next story is titled "Creepy Lady at Grocery Store," and then "Almost Kidnapped?" And it reads like this: This happened a few years ago. I was 19 and males. Oh, I was 19 years old and male, but I still think about it from time to time. In undergrad, I worked at a grocery store near my college campus. I usually would work closing shifts. One night, a woman came in about 9:30 p.m. We closed at 10 p.m. to purchase something. She put everything on the conveyor belt, but when I told her the total, she said she needed to get something from the car and then paid with cash. Didn't think anything of it. And then at 10 o'clock p.m., I started to head out, but a car sped up to the front of the store, and that woman was driving. She asked if she could go back into the store looking for her phone, claiming she had lost it and that she probably just dropped it inside. She pointed to me saying, "I went to his register. Can I go inside with him to look for it?" My manager said that nobody is allowed into the store after closing, but asked me if I could go look around real quick. The woman insisted that she be allowed to go in with me, but my manager was adamant that she could not. I looked around for a couple minutes, actually being very thorough, but ultimately finding nothing. I came back out to let her know I couldn't find it, and my manager offered to call the woman's phone and go look. I figured I wasn't needed anymore, so I went over to my bike. I unlocked my bike and had just started to decide on what music I should put on for my ride back when the car speeds up towards me. Wait, no, when the car speeds up towards me, it's that woman again, and she starts making conversation with me, telling me that I'm so polite, asking if I'm a college student, etc. I didn't think much of it again, aside from the fact that I was tired and wanted to go home. So I just said that I went to school around here and continued to prepare to leave. She saw my bike and asked me about it. Things like where I got it, etc. I told her it was an e-bike. She said she didn't know they made those, but a few moments later said that she had been looking for an e-bike for a while and asked if she could take a picture of mine for reference. I figured it was harmless, so I said sure. She pulls out her phone, which was apparently with her the whole time. Okay, alright, woman. She pulls out her phone, which was apparently with her the whole time, although I didn't think about it at that moment, to take a picture, but then asks why I'm wearing a mask. Or why I'm still wearing a mask. This was 2020. I shrug and just say that I have to wear it into the store, but she starts going on about how it might give me the sinus problems and that I should take it off as she points the camera more towards my bike. I decline and she takes a photo but continues to ask me various questions ranging from, what are you studying, to, do you live on campus? I just started making stuff up at this point as I was getting really annoyed, so I put the keys in my bike and get on to make it clear that I'm done with the conversation and want to go home. Somewhat less concerning, but still something I was weirded out by, she kept saying my name at the end of pretty much every sentence, like, what do you study? Name. Where are you from? Name. Eventually, she leaves, and my manager comes over to ask if I'm okay. I really didn't think anything of it at the time, but when I got home, I started to feel kind of creeped out. She clearly had her phone on her the whole time, yet claimed she didn't have it in order to be alone in the store with me. She took a picture of me along with my mode of transportation. She kept asking questions about where I live, what times I work, etc. And she paid in cash, which isn't creepy on its own, but it made me wonder if that was done to avoid having a record of her coming to the store. Later on, I didn't see that specific woman again, but I had other people do somewhat similar things. For instance, a blue car would often park in the parking lot, and the driver of the car would always stand outside staring at me. I had no idea who this was, and when I would stare back, he would get back into the car. After meeting that woman, other people would intentionally go to my register when others were open and didn't have lines, and ask me similar questions, where I lived, if I had roommates, etc. I was used to normal questions like, oh, you go to nearby university, and what's your major? But these people seemed like they were trying to kidnap me. I always lied, but it makes me wonder if there was actually some sort of human trafficking type of operation that was targeting me for whatever reason, or if that lady was just a little off and that interaction made me paranoid. I was also told by my coworkers that people asked if I was working certain days, and there was a Yelp review that just said something like, does name still work here? He's nice. But it's been deleted and I can't find the screenshot. I don't live there anymore, so there's no way these people can find me now, but it's always just creeped me out. And on the topic of kidnapping, there is a second story about kidnapping, and it is titled, Almost Kidnapped in a McDonald's. And it reads like this. As a kid, I was very bad with misunderstanding social etiquette, or more specifically, how to not overshare or talk with strangers, no matter how many times my parents warned me. This happened possibly when I was around 8 or 9 years old, or so I believe, and prime for being overly talkative. My mom had brought me to McDonald's with a friend who had a daughter, so we could play in the indoor play place after eating. It was late at night. I don't remember why we were there so late or what we had done earlier that day, but the McDonald's was pretty much empty except for us and the staff, and one man sitting alone at a table near the play area. Of course, for whatever reason, little me seeing a person alone went up to him with my friend to start up a conversation. I introduced myself and her, started talking about my interests, my school, a lot of things I don't really remember. I don't remember him replying either, but we eventually left him alone after he called someone on his phone and started speaking a different language. I didn't recognize it, and I don't remember it in enough detail to take a good guess now. My friend and I kept playing until the man left. Then a few hours later, a big man and a young girl, roughly the same age as us, entered the McDonald's. The girl ran up to the glass dividing the counters from the play area and yelled my name excitedly. I went over despite not recognizing her. She started telling me a bunch of things about myself, implying she knew me and I forgot her. She wanted me to come outside to hang out with her. I realized now as an adult, the things she was saying were the things I had told the man on the phone. And me, being an oblivious, naive child, was ready to go to her when my mom finally caught on and ran over to grab me. She dragged me out of the other exit to the car. She was clearly terrified and stressed, and I was confused and I was demanding why she wouldn't let me hang out with that girl. Mom wouldn't answer and she tore out of the parking lot. The man with the little girl got in his own car, from what we could see as we left, and began chasing us. My mom went down several different roads away from our home until she lost them. I was in serious trouble when I got home, and she explained to me this was most likely a kidnapping scheme, and I really needed to stop telling random strangers so much information about myself. I didn't understand how a little girl my age would be involved with the kidnapping another kid. Not to mention, I didn't understand the motivation of a kidnapping at all either. Now that I get it, this was a truly horrifying situation that I just narrowly avoided if it wasn't for my mom. I could have also potentially got my friend in trouble too. Okay, that's actually freaking terrifying, dude. Having like a young girl kind of like be a decoy. I mean, dude, that is disgusting. There's no way that wasn't a kidnapping scheme, actually. Well, at least the original poster made it out alive, I guess, because damn, that was close. Alright, our next story is titled Psycho Follows Me to Preschool. Yeah, it reads like this. This was during my tenure in Japan, during my first teaching job. I was still learning the language and could only understand and speak a little bit. I also had an international driver's license at the time, having failed the local driving test multiple times before passing. 9. I had used a whole month's paycheck to buy a small kei car, think small box car, Spiano Mazda to be precise. Holy shit, I need to fucking learn how to pronounce my cards, dude. Anyways, every other day I drove to this particular preschool where I taught the 3-year-old classes English. It was usually a very boring, uneventful drive and lasted 30 minutes, but this time left me with PTSD. I was running a bit late, so I was driving a bit faster than I was supposed to be going. I didn't want my strict boss to yell at me. I was in the right lane, which was the fast lane. I rarely drove in that lane because I just enjoyed the scenery, but I didn't have time for that today. I noticed that my lane was disappearing, and I saw that there was a space in front of me of the car next to me, the psycho's car. So I put my foot down, going even faster than I was supposed to, and to get in front of the car. I was a whole 2 car lengths in front of him, and except for the speeding aspect, followed the rules of the road. That move to get in front of him apparently upset him so much that he followed my car for 20 minutes to my workplace. I didn't notice as I was trying to quietly urge people to go faster. As I pulled up, I noticed that my usual space was filled. I was rather upset at the time, but I would have been in a worse situation if I was in my usual position. The parking lot was actually just an abandoned gas station outside the school. I parked my car and then get myself situated to get out, grabbing my purse, phone, and mentally preparing myself for the next 3 hours. What I continued to notice is a man's car following me into the parking lot and parking behind me. In all honesty, I'm not proud of any of my decisions in the next 30 minutes of my life. He appears at my window, and as all the kids and their parents are arriving, I just presume that he was a parent. I rolled down my window to see what he wanted, and I, a 24-year-old female at the time, was just trying to be a professional teacher to this random father of my student. Unfortunately, he wasn't a father, but a deranged lunatic. He randomly started screaming at me in a language I didn't understand in front of 2 to 4-year-olds and their parents. I only understand that he was angry about my car and that he was calling the police. I understood the word police. I obviously should have pretended not to have understood that word, because now he was screaming at me about being a liar and that I understood Japanese. Again, out of the words I learned from watching anime at the time, I learned police, Japanese, liar, and angry. So that's literally all I understood from this very unhinged man, still screaming at me in the parking lot where toddlers were literally staring at him. He demanded I followed him across the street, and I agreed. For quite a few reasons. 1, I wanted to get him away from the kids ASAP. 2, the parking lot I was in was not going to give a quick getaway. The one across the street was an Aeon, so basically a big supermarket, aka an easier way to flee. 3, I wanted the psycho to get back in his car, and 4, that's apparently where he sent the police to arrest me for, quote-unquote, trying to kill him, according to what I was told later. I drove to the Aeon and kept my car running. He parked 2 rows ahead of me, glaring at me. For the next few minutes, I awkwardly sit there. The police come and he goes up to them demanding that they see the video. One goes to watch while the other comes to my car to get my version of the story and verify my license. After getting all the clear, he asked what started the situation using Google Translate. I replied that I didn't know the other driver just randomly started yelling at me at my place of work. The officer walked away and spoke with his partner at the psycho's car. They talked with him, promising to deal with me. One officer asked if the psycho had assaulted me. Honestly, that possibility hadn't even occurred to me before that moment, that this very unhinged person could have started an altercation. I replied that no, he didn't, and I just wanted him to go away. Sorry, there's no way that I could afford a legal route on a teacher's salary. They walked back over to the psycho again and promised to get rid of him. I texted my boss the situation because now I was officially missing class. Psycho drives away and then they come and stood protectively next to my car. After waiting 10 minutes, they said that I was free to go. No ticket, no fuss, no arrest on my part or the psycho's part. WTF. Why did I just have to deal with this situation for it to be over with so easily? I was still freaking out and not looking forward to the 30-minute drive home where the psycho was headed. I realized on my way home that I noticed when cars were behind me for a while. I also noticed that I was freaking out because they were heading in the same direction as me on a road with only a single lane per side for 5 minutes. Yay, thanks psycho. I now freak out whenever someone literally drives back into the town behind me. I couldn't shift the feeling of freaking out when someone drove behind me the whole time I was living in Japan. I was able to increase the amount of time someone could drive behind me before freaking out. Eventually I would make a random turn somewhere, pull over and calm myself down. I still am wary when people follow me behind me for more than 10 minutes, but now I can differentiate between them, just trying to get to work versus becoming round 2 of my nightmare. And for our last story, it is titled, Almost Got Myself and a Friend of Mine Kidnapped. And it reads like this. This happened to me and 2 of my friends almost 20 years ago, so the memories are a little bit blurry. The 3 of us were at the ripe age of 5 to 6, and we were already pretty good friends since our older sisters went to the same class, so we were pretty excited to join in on their school's field trip to Transylvania for a couple of days. We visited numerous museums and other cultural and historical sites. On one of those days, we visited the ruins of a historical castle which was beside a village on a smaller mountain surrounded by forests and roads leading to bigger towns. Ruins like this are all over Transylvania, so it didn't have much infrastructure except for a parking lot and the roads connected to it. After the mandatory inspection of the ruin, the teachers allowed the class and us 3 bozos to have an hour of free time for playing on the note not to go too far. We played hide and seek with the older kids of my sister's class. Both my friends and myself had a beef with our older sisters, and we thought this would be an opportunity like no other to show them who the superior beings are in our families. So when it was our turn to hide, we came up with the plan to ignore our teacher's words and hide somewhere they would never find us. We started to run towards the ruins of the castle and hid at the parking lot behind it. It was a little further away than we were allowed to go from the place where our teachers and my sister's class was, and definitely out of sight. Our plan was to scare the shit out of our sisters and only to come out victoriously when they had multiple panic attacks. There were only a handful of cars and only a person or 2 except for us. The game started a while ago, and we were hiding behind a car when an older man around 40 approached us. He had a mustache, a beer belly, and was about 5'7" tall. It was obvious that he listened to us talk and giggle about what a great hiding spot we had found. With a smile, he suggested that we should hide in the back of his car and pointed at an old and rather trashy car. Now this is the moment where any kid with a basic set of survival instincts would run back to the teachers and tell everything. But not me and one of my friends. The guy even suggested that he would cover us with a couple of blankets once we hide in the back seat. I was so excited about beating my sister in a silly game that I didn't even realize how creepy that sounds. So I said, okay, with the mentioned similarly excited friend of mine. Lucky for us, the 3rd kid in our friend group still had his sanity, so politely refused and suggested that we should go back to the teachers. The guy tried to convince us a couple of times, but I guess he didn't want to risk being more aggressive with the whole class and teachers in the nearby. So we could leave and walk back to the others, disappointed and confused why our friend was such a buzzkill. We didn't talk about what happened to our teachers nor to anyone after because despite how weird it was, we couldn't tell for sure if the stranger was actually a bad guy. Looking back at it, he was definitely a bad call, but we weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. I'm not entirely sure if the guy really wanted to do something horrible to us, or if he was just being friendly, but looking back at it, it was definitely creepy. Long story short, don't get into a stranger's car, no matter how much it would piss off your sister. And to the stranger who wanted 3 kids in the backseat of the car, let's never meet again. And that was all the stories we had today. If you have anything interesting that like happened to you, just a long story that you want me to read, type it in the comment section. And if you don't have that, then just let me know what type of stories you want to read. I've just been reading nonfiction stuff, but if you want to like want me to read some fiction, horror stuff, or like literally anything, relationship problems, hey, just let me know. I'll read it definitely, but because I want to keep doing this Minecraft world, dude. I've never been able to do a Minecraft world without like having no motivation. So, yeah. Peace.